Welcome back to On Texas Football for the weekly edition of the Recruiting Breakdown. I'm CJ Vogel, joined as always by Gerry Hamilton. And Gerry, we talked about it last week. Texas played Georgia. You know, they had everybody under the sun on the 25, 26 recruiting class still on the big board on campus, essentially. The game didn't go their way, but a lot of takeaways, whether it be the atmosphere, the city, the buzz, whatever it might be. Give me your thoughts real quick before we go into 2025 defensive line recruiting, some of the reactions from 26 prospects and what's left on the board for Texas. Let me get your quick thoughts on what that game meant for Texas in terms of overall theme and takeaways from this game this weekend against Georgia.
I think it was an absolute home run in terms of the product the University of Texas has in recruiting in all sports. Jared Elliott, I think, mentioned it somewhere as well. But in football, obviously, it was an unbelievable atmosphere. I've not heard one single person say anything other than it was an incredible atmosphere. And that means prospect, parent, circle of people, what have you. Everybody was impressed. And these are people, there's one person I talked to that had a prospect that's been on campus at Alabama for Georgia, at USC, at a couple other places. And he was like, man, it's as good as we've been to. And that says a lot right there. And again, I always say this because, you know, the fans look at these games different than prospects do. They don't live snap to snap, possession to possession, quarter to quarter, and a lot of times in win-losses like the fan base does. And Texas has put a tremendous product out on display for recruits, parents, and circles of recruits and high school coaches who may be in there, who make visits with kids. It was extremely impressive. You know, and the only caveat I take out of a game like that where Georgia came out victorious is if you're going into the Peach State and you're battling Georgia for a guy or two, well, that got a little tougher.
Yeah, certainly, especially the defensive performance Georgia put up in the first half. But to echo that, Gerry, again, the atmosphere, the spectacle, everything that went into around the game was a home run for Texas.
Yes.
And, of course, that's one of the larger takeaways. I remember talking to Michael Terry after his visit earlier in the year. Of course, he was back on campus this weekend, excuse me. He said, yeah, I've never been to a game like that. So that resonates with these recruits more so than just about anything else. And, of course, winning helps. I mean, Texas is still top 5 in the country right now.
Because, CJ, the thing we know about recruiting is these kids look at that game and say, hey, I could have helped right there. Maybe I could have been the difference there.
Yep.
Hey, I can identify with this Anthony Hill guy right here. If you're a running back, maybe you saw that and said, you know, I think I'm going to score on that play. That's just a different mindset of a recruit versus the fan who live and die with every play.
Yeah, certainly. And to Andrew Makuba's point on why he picked Texas, he wanted to play in big games like this. So that certainly plays into it as well. Before we head into 2025 recruiting updates, especially on that defensive line, because Texas hosted a whole slew of big-time talented prospects there. Gerry, quick word about our sponsor, Mark Saunders in Allstate.
Yeah, Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Well, I got that guy for you. That's Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders, serving the Austin and Round Rock area and all of the state of Texas. He's the only insurance agent you'll need for everything: home, car, boat, motorcycle, RV, and ATV. It's hunting season. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today at 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? You'll be in great hands with the more than 35 years of experience of Texas alum Mark Saunders. Again, if you're looking for someone local in the Austin Round Rock area or all around the state of Texas, give Mark Saunders a call, 512-218-8571.
Perfect. Thank you, Gerry, and thank you, Mark Saunders and Allstate, for sponsoring this week's recruiting breakdown. All right, Gerry, let's dive into it, because that 2025 class, you know, they sit with 21 recruits, but that defensive line and edge room was certainly filled with prospects this weekend. Of course, Justice Terry made it on. Joseph Mbachu made it on for an official visit. I actually want to start there because Mbachu, probably the most recent news of this class, he decommitted from Florida following the visit. I think if you read the tea leaves, that normally bodes well for the team that just visited. But of course, there's still, some decisions that need to be made for the talented Georgia prospect.
Yeah, and I think there's a number of D linemen, starting with the official visitors is the place to be. On Joseph Mbachu, look, I don't know if I've even been considering that he was a Florida commitment for a while, honestly, since going by Grayson a few weeks ago. I don't think Florida's where he ends up. I think Texas, Auburn, USC right now are your top three. He's going to be at Michigan this weekend. He's going to continue on with the visit process. Who knows? Hey, look, if Florida wins in Austin, that could change, right? I mean, you don't know. Florida's playing a little better football right now, and Florida will continue to recruit him. And we'll have to see if Georgia makes a late play. They're getting kind of tight on the D line with Elijah Griffin committed and still after just five-star Justice Terry. But I think Texas has done very well in both visits with Mbaktu. The first unofficial visit earlier in the season was him and his father. This time it was the entire family. Member of the Grayson defensive coordinator made the trip. He's made a lot of trips with him. So I think Texas is doing it really well with Joseph Mbaktu. Am I saying they lead or they're going to get him? I'm not ready to say that because he's still got trips left. And I don't think as of today he's planning on doing anything till the first week of December. That's a long way to go in this recruitment, even though that's technically like 40 days. It's 45 days. It's still a long way to go in the recruiting world.
Absolutely. And of course, things move quickly, as timelines. You mentioned Georgia also adding another 5-star defensive lineman. It feels like a theme over the past few years, but that spot fills up for them and leaves one open for the Longhorns in that race as well. But moving on, Walter Mathis, a couple of guys also on campus, Chase Sims. What's this big picture looking like on the big board for the Texas defensive line room right now?
Yeah, so let's start with Justice Terry, then the other D lineman that was officially visiting. And I've said this, and I'm going to remain this way. And if I'm wrong, people can tell me I'm wrong. If he's a must-get recruit for Georgia, and he has a 5-star in the state of Georgia on the defensive line, how many of those guys have they lost? So Let's start there. I think Texas impressed him. I think he had a really good visit to Texas. Everything you'd expect. If that's your first impression of the University of Texas, you and your parents are going to be kind of blown away.
Right.
Okay. Georgia and Auburn were the leaders of this recruitment going into the visit. I think Texas is going to be right there, but I'll wake me up when Kirby loses a 5-star that he really feels like they have to have in Georgia. I mean, it just rarely happens right now. So that's where I'm at with that recruitment. Other guys on campus, Chase Sims. I think Chase Sims finally put out some senior video for everybody. The Texas A&M commitment showed up in Austin with his family, not just him, his entire family. This is from the Travis game earlier this season. I was at this game, and he totally dominated Fort Bend Travis, a combination of speed, quickness, and motor. But he was scheduled to make an official visit a few weeks ago. That got squashed by A&M. Then he shows up for the Georgia game. And look, I think Texas is very much in this battle. Am I saying they're going to beat A&M? I'm not saying that. I do think when recruiting started for Chase Sims, Texas was the school he had his eye on the whole time. Now, A&M's been all in on him for so long, but if you're A&M, you don't feel comfortable that him and his family showed up at the Georgia game because you know the type of show that was. This recruitment will probably continue on for a while, but I do think Texas has a chance here, and I'm not saying they're going to get him, but I think there's a chance. Malcolm Simpson was also on campus, the 6'3", 255, 260-pound defensive lineman with a frame that carry 295, 300 out of Hitchcock, the Nebraska commitment. We'll see if Texas schedules an official visit for him. They're continuing to monitor him on the field academically. And we'll see if they schedule official visit there. The 4-star lineman out of Hitchcock, another talented lineman on campus. Outside of that, the guys that weren't on campus, it's going to be imperative to get 2 of these guys on campus in November. That's Kevin Wynn out of Greene County, the Florida State commitment, and that's Walter Mathis, who I think is a longer shot even than Kevin Wynn since he didn't make it in for Georgia. That's the 4-star, I think, top 75 level player in the country out of Savannah Calvary Day, committed to LSU. I think he is tremendous. Will Texas be able to get either one of those guys in November? Well, we'll see, but it's going to have to be for the Florida game or it's going to have to be for the Kentucky game if it's going to be a game day visit. Because we don't have signing day anymore, but let's just call it, announcement day is final destination. I don't even know what you want to call it, is December 4th. So that's where we're at on D-line recruiting. I think Texas has cast a really good net here that they have in front of them, and they just got to go win a couple more to have a solid 4-man class. Because Myron Charles is on campus, the commitment, along with Javion Hilson, who I know we're about to get to. So Myron Charles being on campus for a game this year was big. Josiah Sharma, Myron Charles, you have to commit those guys. You have to recruit those guys like they're not committed, because Oregon's still pushing for Sharma, and Miami is still pushing for Myron Charles. You have to recruit them like they're not committed right now, and I think Texas is doing a good job of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to dive into a couple quick hitters before we move on here. Javion Hilson and Myron Charles, Jerry. It felt like they were inseparable the entire pre-game, morning situation before the game. They were walking around the facility, walking around Bevo Boulevard. They were right by each other's hips the entire time. They came in together, I believe, on the same flight as well. So something to keep an eye on there. Of course, Myron Charles in the Texas class, Javion Hilson, someone that Texas was wanting in the summer. Texas, I believe, finished second there to Florida State previously. Got him back on campus for this game as well. As media kind of filters down to the field, I looked up and you see Jonah Williams sitting first row on his official visit. He and his family, they were getting into the game, Jared, and I think there was some passion there. I'll say that from that side in terms of it's kind of a frustrating game for Texas. They were getting into it a little bit as Texas was trying to mount that comeback late in the fourth quarter. Obviously, they were unable to. And then prior to the game, where the coaches were able to sit and talk with a number of recruits, Khalid Lockett and new Texas commit Dalen McCutcheon spent a lot of time with Chris Jackson on the sideline. Obviously, the two DFW wide receivers have known each other for quite some time. Fun little fact there. They took a visit their freshman year where they each put on the same numbered jersey at Texas, did a photo shoot, and then 3 years later, they're in the same class looking to be wide receiver teammates again at Texas. So pretty cool fun fact right there. But about Michael Terry, he's the next on our list here, Jerry. Back on campus, his second game for the Longhorns this year. I still feel really good about this one. I believe you still feel really good about this one. There are some Texas ties in his corner here. And again, getting him back on campus to highlight that atmosphere, which I mentioned earlier, which was key for him in his first trip, I think just kind of adds to the Texas lead as we move closer and closer to a possible decision date for Michael Terry.
Yeah, and I think he's, of these top targets, he may be the first guy to announce a decision date that's not in December. Right. I could see something happening early, mid-November with Michael Terry. I don't think that's out of the question. And I do think Texas is still in a solid position where Javion Hilson currently is on December 4th, which used to be signing day, which it's whatever you want to call it now. And he'll have more visits in front of him. But I think Texas is doing pretty well with Hilson. But Michael Terry should be the first 2025 guy of these remaining targets off the board that's not committed somewhere now. And there's really only three when you think about it. There's only three guys that aren't committed. It's Hilson, it's Terry, it's Madden Framo, who we'll see if they get him back on campus in November.
Now, as we inch closer to November, which means we're closer to December, Flipmas is going to become an even more prominent discussion. And Texas hosted two really important visitors that are committed elsewhere, right? Riley Pettijohn and Dorian Brew.
Yeah.
Is Texas inching closer to flipping either of them, or is that something that needs to be kind of tapped on the brakes for the moment?
You don't show up at a game of this magnitude, which is going to be publicized, if you're not interested. That's the one takeaway. And because, behind the scenes, people will be like, oh, no, this guy's definitely not flipping. As people said, no chance he's flipping. You don't show up to a game of that magnitude if you don't have some interest, period. It just doesn't work that way, just like Chase Sims showing up, right? Because it's much easier to not show up and not take all the brushback on social media, the extra phone calls that you're going to get from the school you're committed to. You're interested if you show up. Does that mean you're going to flip? No, it doesn't. But the interest for both of those guys is real. It'll be interesting to see with Dorian Brew. The one thing I'm watching there, and I think we're all watching there, is as this thing gets closer to December 4th, does staying closer to mom, family actually come into play? That's the thing I'm watching for Dorian Brew, because Oregon is still a long way away. They're ranked number one. I get it. A long way away. Dan Lanning's doing a tremendous job. Hard place to get to. Does it factor in at the end of the day that mom's going to be in the Houston area, or even, potentially in the state of Texas? Is that going to factor in at all? That's something we're going to watch for. Riley Pettijohn, look, Texas will keep chipping away there. And that's kind of where these recruitments are coming down to. These will be decided in the next 30 days. legitimately. That's what's going on here with a lot of these recruitments. And I'm not saying a kid can't make a decision earlier and be done with the process, but that's what we're really coming down to with all these guys. They're all national recruitments. We haven't talked about one kid yet that's not a national recruitment on some level. I mean, Chase Sims, A&M Texas, that's a national recruitment. These are two teams, even though he's a state of Texas kid, that are ranked nationally.
Right.
Your kids in Georgia are being recruited by all over the country, right? Chase Sims could go visit USC, could go visit all these places. He's just not going to do it. So all these are national or real just battles in recruiting. So it's going to take some time to play out for the majority of them. But I think in the next 30 days, the Texas staff will know exactly where they stand with this class headed into December 4th.
No, of course, it certainly helps having a lot of commits on campus to help kind of sway and put into at least an image in person, Jerry, of, hey, come play with us. We got something special right here. KJ Lacey, obviously the front runner in all of this. On the flip side, Diabell in the 26 class, one of the bigger names there, already committed to Texas with Zayla Hicks and Chris Stewart. Texas hosted a number of 2026 prospects on campus. Of course, I was able to catch up with a couple of them. Adam Guthrie out of Miami Trace, Ohio, a guy that reached out to Texas because of the Diabell commitment and said, hey, how do I start to get in contact with you guys? How can I come play with Steve Sarkisian and Diabell in this offense? That's something I'm interested in. He had a great time on campus despite the loss. I talked with Tank King out of the Houston area, as well as Isaiah Williams, one of the top 7,500 players in the entire country out of Fort Bend Marshall, teammate of Caleb Chester. Both of them said that they were able to talk with the coaching staff before the game. They had a great time, great environment. They highlighted everything that goes into a game like this. Sounds like the visits went well. And of course, one 2027 note here, Jerry. Quarterback Brady Edmonds out of Huntington Beach had to reschedule his trip. He did not make it in for the Georgia game. Maybe a good thing with the way the quarterback play went on in that game, but he's looking to come back to campus for either the Florida or the Kentucky game sometime in November. That's something that Texas fans should keep a close eye on because he's one of the top gunslingers in the entire country, regardless of classification at the moment. But before we get to the end of our video here, and I got a 26 question for you here, Jerry, and then some basketball notes coming up here. A quick word for Mark Saunders and Allstate before we pack it on up and get out of here.
Yeah. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? I'm a broken record because it's true. That's Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders, who serves the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas. He's the only insurance agent you'll need. Everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and that ATV for all those hunting trips. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today at 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? With more than 35 years of experience, you'll be in great hands with Mark Saunders, Texas alum. Again, if you're in the Austin and Round Rock area or in the entire state of Texas, do what so many other On Texas Football family members have done. That's give Mark Saunders a call today, 512-218-8571.
Perfect. Thank you again, Mark Saunders and Allstate, for sponsoring the Recruiting Breakdown. Jerry, I mentioned a couple 26 notes there, but I'm missing some big ones. And by big, I mean some big humans. Because that was a loaded group of offensive linemen that were on campus. You had John Turntime, Toa Katoa, Nicholas Robertson. I mean, big list right there. Not to mention a talented duo from Prosper. What did you take away from this weekend with that group? And, I mean, are you starting to see some dominoes getting close to falling, perhaps?
I think what's interesting is that gave Kyle Flood and the staff a chance to, Turntime's obviously could commit to Texas anytime. Toa Katoa could. I think Nicholas Robertson could. But then there's Pule Primus out of Midland High, whose sophomore tape was good. Junior tape's even better. He was back on campus. I think that's one Texas is taking a long look at. They haven't offered yet. It wouldn't shock me if they did. You mentioned the two Prosper kids. So Turntine, I think, is a Texas lean. I think Katoa is at least 50-50, probably Texas lean. I think Nicholas Robertson's probably a Texas lean. So there's a number of really talented offensive linemen on campus. I'm not saying Texas will get all those guys. It's recruiting. But they were all on campus once again. And I think for the running backs on campus, that impresses them as well. Amari Latimer from Tyrone, Georgia, Sandy Creek High is an absolute stud downhill back. And then you had Javian Osborne from Forney, KJ Edwards from Carthage. I mean, there were a number of backs there. But that's also, along with the game, the atmosphere, that was also impressive to have those big offensive linemen in that 26 26 class and some of the 25 guys that are committed to Texas on hand for that game. I think Texas is doing really well early on with the 2026 top OL targets. I'm interested to see if they extend another offer or two coming up, because Poulet Primus tape's pretty good now for junior.
Yeah, good stuff there. Of course, I remember when Arch Manning was a junior, and you get them on campus with a Kelvin Banks and DJ Campbell and Cole Hudson, Connor Robertson. You show him what he could play behind, and I don't know if it did, but that's certainly a great recruiting pitch there. But overall, despite the loss on the field, I would say this was a successful recruiting event, a recruiting weekend for the Texas Longhorns with everybody that they hosted, the number of guys that were able to get in from out of state, a big-time recruiting event, and they'll certainly have 2 other opportunities to impress again with Kentucky and Florida later on this year. So that wraps it up on the gridiron, Jerry, but it wouldn't be on Texas football if we didn't throw in some basketball notes on there as well. What's the latest on the hard court?
Yeah, so John Clark, the 6'9" power forward, skilled power forward, that's originally from Klein Cain High, playing at Lincoln Prep in Missouri his senior year. Texas, Kansas, U of H, one of those 3 I think is going to win out for John Clark. I think Texas has done pretty well with that recruitment. We'll see if they can close that out, because obviously it's not signing day anymore, but these kids are all going to announce in early November. The majority, some may wait until the spring though. Then there's Shelton Henderson. And John Clark, by the way, top 50 prospect in the country. And there's Shelton Henderson, top 40 prospect in the country, 6'6" wing out of Houston Bel Air. This one's going to come down to how hard Duke pushes. I think we'll know something in the next week, 10 days there on Shelton Henderson. How big of a push does Duke get? Because obviously Jay Lucas on that staff, and Shelton Henderson's played for John Lucas, AAU, JL3 for years. Mm-hmm. So that's a big factor there. How big is the Duke push? If not, then Texas or Louisville will be the decision for Shelton Henderson. So we'll see what happens. So Texas they want to sign 2 guys max early. They're also still after Nate Avent, one of the top 5 players in the country, but that will be a spring decision after he sees what happens with teams this year, the portal, who comes and goes, all that good stuff. Then on the women's side, Texas still right there for Aaliyah Chavez. I think she was at Oklahoma over the weekend. But Texas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma are your 3 schools there. Question with that recruitment is, she's always been a Nike kid. Is she going to walk away from Nike to go to Texas Tech and wear Adidas? We'll have to see on that.
Well, that'll be interesting. Thank you, Jerry, for all the wisdom on the recruiting side for football and basketball there, Texas fans. If you want some more, we got it all on TexasFootball.com. A lot of momentum even after this weekend, I would say, on both sides. And, of course, to your point, I think you brought up Jared Elliott earlier. He had to say that some of his recruits had to stay up by the Domain this weekend because of all of the festivities with F1 and the big game down in the city. So a lot going on for Texas, a lot of momentum, and we'll have it covered for you here at On Texas Football. But for Gerry Hamilton, I'm CJ Vogel. Until next week in the Recruiting Breakdown, welcome.